So, ladies and gentlemen, being past the stated hour, we call the General's Issue Committee to order. And a bit of a surprise for myself, I am in the chair today. So, Deputy Mayor, in fact, I was sitting at my table when the clerk had to advise me. So, on time, I just want to make Joey know that I was on time and ready to go. I want to thank staff. I know that the mayor had the chamber had the breakfast this morning with the mayor, and I know that a number of us attended, and I think Councillor Ferguson is probably still there. So that might explain some of the delay for some of the councillors. So we call the meeting to order. I would members of the public are advised that our meetings are webcast live by the City of Hamilton and temporarily archived on the city's website. Other individuals and the media may also be audibly and or visually recording this meeting. As well, a reminder that all electronic devices are to be switched to a non-audible function during committee meetings. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, there are. Mr. Deputy Mayor, there are added discussion items 8.6A, the Ontario Works Employment Services Review Report AUD 17007. This was the private and confidential report that was tabled at the March 22nd meeting pending additional information from staff. And though this report was confidential at this time because the staff had not been advised, the affected staff are now aware, so the report is completely public. Added is item 8.6B. The updated report, the Ontario Works Employment Services Review AUD 17007A. This report was originally listed on today's agenda as item 12.1, but as it does not contain any confidential information, it has been moved up to item 8.6B on today's agenda. So the two will be dealt with together. Two added notices of motion. The first one is Canada 115 Hamilton Funding Program, and 10.2, the Dundas Real McCoy's Senior AAA Hockey Club ice fee waiver. And that's it.
May I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended? Moved by Councillor Green, second by Councillor Johnson. All those in favour? Any opposed? Carried. Declaration of interest? Seeing none. Approval of minutes of previous meeting, April 19th. May I have a motion? Moved by Councillor Johnson, second by Councillor Vanderbeek. All those in favour? Any opposed? Carried. Consent items. Members of the committee, you have before you consent items 5.1 to 5.4. May I have please have a motion to receive items 5.1, 5.3, and 5.4. Go ahead, Councillor Green. No. Any discussion on 5.1, 5.3, or 5.4? Seeing none, may I have a motion to receive the items? Moved by Councillor Doug Connolly, second by Councillor Arlene Vanderbeek. All those in favour? Any opposed? Carried. Now, may I have a mover and seconder for item 5.2? Councillor Green.
I do have a motion for item 5.2, Mr. Deputy Mayor. And I'm not clear if it should come at this point or if you want me to save it to motions at the end. But it is respecting this item. Well,
you certainly can speak to it at this point. As I understand it, the motions that pertain to reports that are in front of us are, in fact,
fair game.
Fair game, absolutely.
So you'll see before us, or have copies gone out, Stephanie? No worries. I'm happy to speak to the report and then at a later time move the motion as it's related to the report to allow full discussion if that suffices.
Okay. Since it is a fairly lengthy motion, I would suggest, and that's probably prudent, that we hold off on the motion until we deal with motions and deal with the report directly at this point in time, and that obviously give opportunity for those that haven't received or had an opportunity to read the motion to digest it and have informed discussion at the point of discussion.
It's one of our favorite report backs anyway, so there's no action required necessarily in the motion, but I'll speak to this item 5.2, which are the staff recommendations on tax policies as it relates to area rating. Mr. Deputy Mayor, through you to Mike, for layman's terms and layman's purposes, we still have in this listing under recommendation B that the transition ratios be adopted, as well as in C that the final approved tax operating budget include the tax ratios that be established for the year. So one of the things that always comes to mind, Mr. Deputy Mayor, when these are posted, folks will look at this and they'll say residents are at a 1.0 rate, multi-res at a 2.74 rate. And I did have the opportunity to speak with staff, but I think for the purpose of this report that's being presented today, I would like to ask through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, if staff could just briefly elaborate on that differential and what that means in terms of real dollars.
So through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, the tax ratios and the tax rates, I'll just remind committee, and I believe we discussed this briefly through the budget process, we always advise property owners when they consider their tax impact, the tax burden, they need to consider two factors, the assessed value of the property and the tax rates. And what's before you through the tax policies report is confirming the tax ratios and the overall 2017 tax burden. As relates to, as Councillor Green's identified, recommendation C speaks to our tax ratios, and the tax ratios you'll see in the report are in part regulated through the province of Ontario, and you'll see specifically on page 9 of 16 as the province requires municipalities to achieve certain thresholds when it comes to tax ratios. And for the most part, the City of Hamilton is meeting those thresholds in terms of, you'll see provincial range of fairness on the far right. There's two classes where our tax ratios exceed that provincial range of fairness, and as a result, we're restricted on passing on the full tax burden. And that's our residual and large industrial classes. So we refer to those as protected classes. They only receive 50% of the residential tax impact because their tax ratios exceed that provincial defined range of fairness. As it relates, coming back to recommendation C, is staff are asking that committee approve the tax ratios. But again, those tax ratios, property owners need to consider the assessed value. And to Councillor Green's motion, when the motion's before committee, is the report back would speak to assessments and how assessments vary. And what I mean by that is every property class is not treated equally in terms of how their properties are assessed. So residential, it's market value. In case of commercial industrial, it could be a variety. It could be based on rents, leases. It could be based on their economic functionality. In the case of condominiums, it better reflects residential market value. But in the case of multi-res, it differs from, for instance, how condominiums are assessed. So again, I know that sounds like a lot of information, a lot of factors, but it does come back to those two principal factors. Assessment and tax rates determine tax burden.
And so the real amount is similar, although the rates are different in like-to-like or at least similar situations. And you will remember, members of this committee, Deputy Mayor and Mike, I asked that question during budget time because of how it looks on the face of the report. It looks like there is a disproportionate burden to renters. And I'm very interested, and you'll see in my motion, which is a report back motion, a follow-up to a 2008 committee of the whole that considered multi-residential property taxation. So it's important on item page 6 of 16, perhaps, Mike, you can speak to the second paragraph that says multi-residential property classes as a whole, including property in the multi-residential and new multi-residential property classes, is experiencing an average tax reduction of minus 2.2. So can you explain what that might mean for folks? Does that get passed on to the renter, or is it solely absorbed in the profit margins of the owner.
So through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, great question, because we've raised this at our Treasurers Group with provincial representatives. So you'll see on page 6 of 16, staff identified a couple factors that are affecting multi-residential property class owners in 2017. One is the province imposed a restriction on any additional tax burden for multi-residential for 2017 until such time as they've had a better opportunity to assess what impacts are accruing to the multi-residential class, and we would expect that there would be some potentially permanent regulatory legislative changes starting in 2018. So again, municipalities across Ontario were not able to pass on any additional tax impact to the multi-residential class. That contributed to the change in multi-res in 2017 in the case of Hamilton. The other factor is reassessment. And so, again, we discussed previously the different classes and the different impacts reassessment the change in valuations had. In the case of multi-res, their increase in valuations, they still increased, their increase in valuations was not at the same rate of residential. So consequently, they received some relief as a result of that. So combining those two factors, in the case of, for the City of Hamilton, citywide, multi-res reflects a reduction of 2.2%. To Councillor Green's question, and this is the question we posed to the province, to provincial staff, is recognizing the objective of the restriction to pass on tax increases is meant to provide relief to renters. How are we assured that that relief is flowing down to renters? And so that's an uncertainty. We don't know whether that's the case. And so that's one of the questions or one of the recommendations we've made to provincial staff as we go through an engagement and consultation process as it relates to multi-res. If the province is looking at introducing any permanent adjustments, if the objective is to provide relief to renters, how are we assured that those adjustments are going to flow down to renters?
And so as I really appreciate the clarity of that answer, because it's something that I struggled with during the budget process. I'm starting to now try to learn myself, and as I had an opportunity to meet with staff, who were excellent, by the way, in explaining it to me, it occurred to me that the general public must be even more confused in how this works, because we often hear about homeowner, taxpayer, amongst a bunch of other descriptors, and then you hear renter in a way that I think doesn't fully appreciate the tax implications of their rent per square foot. So, we're looking at a shifting tax base right now. We're looking at density, all the, the proper sound planning principles that we want to create sustainable tax burdens for folks, and yet that for me still remains a bit of voodoo. So at a future time, I'll come back to that motion asking for a report back, because the last time this was done was in 2008. Mr. Deputy Mayor, I have two more questions on this. One is on subsection F. It says that the existing for eligible charities and similar organizations be continued. How do we define what a similar organization is? And is this information readily available? Because, my concern is that we might have quasi-charities, organizations posing as charities, getting some of these benefits of the tax rebate, but perhaps not fully accountable in that way. So how do we define similar organizations to eligible charities?
Through the chair, sorry, the legal definition might be a little bit too complicated for me to explain, but we added similar organizations a couple of years ago because there were some educational institutions that rented the location of the business. So the idea was to give them a relief to educational institutions similar to the ones that charities receive.
So, I would maybe add in my report back that we get a clear definition of that and maybe a list of who those might be. Because, again, at the existing 40% tax rebate, that's substantial. And then the other piece is on G, which is something that our residents have been fighting up for. I can think of Julie Michael down on Barton Street and the folks in the Barton Village BIA and other BIAs through Ward 3. And I would go so far as to say, Mr. Deputy Mayor, my ward probably has the most amount of commercial AC rate vacancies. I think that's a pretty safe statement to make. And yet we still have this existing 30% rebate, but yet the province has given us flexibility. So I understand that there's a report back coming. Can we just maybe talk about that for a minute and why, if the report back is coming, is it recommended that we stay the course?
So through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, as it relates to, I believe the councillor is referring to the vacancy rebate for commercial and vacant and excess industrial lands. Committee did approve a communication engagement process. I believe that was approved at the last council meeting. The timeline that staff are working towards, we're currently in that engagement consultation process. The province has imposed some specific dates to affect any potential changes to the vacancy rebate for 2017. The last potential date we have, or that council has, in terms of affecting any change is prior to July 1st of this year. If council wishes to make any changes to the rebates, we must have that resolution to the minister by July 1st of this year. So currently we are consulting with the community, engaging the community. Prior to developing any recommendations, we wanted to go through that process to hear from the community. Based on that feedback, staff would develop some options and potentially a recommendation to council, and it would be before council prior to, I believe we're targeting a June date, so that we could have it to the minister's office by July 1st of 2017.
That's very reassuring for our residents who've been, working on this for 2 years. I know that my councillor colleagues have been working on this in previous terms even, but now we're in that spot with legislation. I thought it important, Mr. Deputy Mayor, that the general public understands that we are on pace to, if we so choose, to revisit that piece and hopefully take away the incentive of vacancy. Because I can tell you anecdotally, there are some businesses or some locations that report to be vacant and yet have illegal residents on grade at the retail level in what I consider to be substandard living conditions, and certainly, having a huge impact on the landscape of the retail corridors that we're trying to revitalize here. So with that being said, Mr. Deputy Mayor, through you to Mike, I just want to thank Gloria and your team for putting this report together. It provides clarity for me as a new councillor, and I think for the general public. And I look forward to moving the motion that would perhaps provide us with more insight into where we are as it relates to the multi-res and the new provincial legislation and the impacts that it might have on the costs of rent. Because I know that the increasing costs of rent are increasingly becoming a greater percentage of people's overall monthly income and forcing people into a crisis of precarity in terms of where they're able to live in this city. So from a policy perspective, as one of the ways to help combat that. Thank you for indulging me on those questions, Mr. Deputy Mayor and members of the committee.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Mr. Deputy Mayor. So, Mike, on your report 5.2 and ultimately Councillor Green's motion, I don't mind supporting and approving both at the appropriate time, but I think, Mike, you nailed it about the landlords. They often are easy to blame the city in terms of any tax increases that they have to pass on to their renters, which provides some additional hardship. Yet they are very slow and hesitant and sometimes resistance or right to the point of declining, passing on any potential reductions to their renters, and they end up either swallowing it, keeping it, retaining it within the corporation itself. So that really bothers me. And so, because the last thing I want to do, Mr. Deputy Mayor, is just automatically going down a path where we're trying to help the multi-res community, but then shift even more burden over to the single-family homeowner, who, as we know, many of them themselves are of modest income and tapped out to some degree and hanging on. So just, Mr. Deputy Mayor, through to General Manager Zagarek, based on the Q&A back and forth from Councillor Green to you, is my interpretation accurate in terms of where this is going right now? Mr. Deputy Mayor, through to Mike, please.
So through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, it is. And part of our consultation with the province as we work towards a solution as it relates to multi-res in 2018, province-wide, I would expect at a minimum in the Golden Horseshoe area is to better understand what the overall or overarching objectives of the province are, making sure that the tools that are employed are going to achieve that objective. So again, if the objective is to provide relief to renters, making sure that whatever tools we employ are going to achieve that outcome.
Thank you, Mike. So if we can down the road, and we've got lots of time in terms of reports coming back and that this is all approved today, but if we're solving one problem with multi-res, I don't want to create another problem with the single-family homeowner in terms of how a shift might occur if it hypothetically does. Mr. Deputy Mayor, on Report 5.2, Mike, I'm really pleased under Part I and Part J about the Seniors Tax Rebate Program. Mike, roughly how many were eligible and approved for the program? Was it about 3,700 of our seniors last year across the city? Mr. Deputy Mayor, through to Mike.
So through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I believe that range of 3,600 to 3,700 is correct.
And Mr. Deputy Mayor, I'm very pleased that every year, as you can see, I think this has been a program that I believe our City of Hamilton led after amalgamation, but now I've learned that other municipalities have piggybacked and adopted our model for a seniors tax rebate for those that qualify under assessment and income, and for those that want to stay in their homes for as long as they possibly wish to, instead of being institutionalized unnecessarily. I understand other municipalities, Mike, may have offering more on a tax rebate standpoint. Without getting into details, is that correct in terms of my homework? Mr. Deputy Mayor, through to Mike.
So through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, the amount per individual may be greater, but the overall investment may not be. So again, each municipality will have different ratios of seniors and will have different thresholds or criteria of the program. So again, absolutely, in some municipalities, the dollar amounts eligible for recipients may be greater, but the overall spend may not be as great as City of Hamilton.
Thank you, Mike. And as you can see to my colleagues, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I'm glad that every year staff, Mike's excellent staff, this year it's with Gloria Rojas, that they do a review, they try to increase the assessed value given the market conditions, try to increase the income threshold and the rebate itself, so that we can hopefully capture even more seniors. This isn't for those few seniors that have, have struck it rich, and they're very few, and good for them that they have. But this is for those many, many seniors across our city, and I have a large population in my ward, Mr. Deputy Mayor, that this is a small but symbolic program that every little dollar helps for them. Those are on a limited disposable income. So I'm really proud of this program. And under the J part, as you see, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I want to thank General Manager Zagarek and Brian McMullen, Director McMullen, and Gloria Rojas. Recently met with them with some interested citizens that were providing some input on how maybe we can match up a little better with the GIS, the Guaranteed Income Supplement, of the federal program that maybe will allow for a greater rebate or a greater opportunity for more than 3,700 seniors across our city to tap into this program. So otherwise, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I'm glad with the direction we're going in. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I'm pleased I won that arm wrestle. Thank you. Just a quick question. I want to thank Councillor Jackson for raising what he did. But Mike, just refresh my memory, and maybe I'm incorrect, but at budget time, there was a ruling that came down from the province with regards to the multi-res, and that's already been factored into this year's budget, and anything from that over and above has gone on to the single-family residential. You could clarify better, please.
So through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, the councillor's correct. In 2016, late 2016, the province imposed the restriction on multi-res, and as a result of that restriction, as well as the reassessment shifts there is a transfer of burden from the multi-res onto residential in part. So it was one of the contributing factors to the overall increase in the residential tax impact.
And what were we looking at? Was about 0.2% or something? Could you refresh my memory on what that?
So through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, that was in total, so including commercial and industrial.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you. And I ask Councillor Scully to take the chair. The province of Ontario have the tools and the ability to do the assessments in regards to all the regulatory changes that goes right across the different ministries in the spectrum, and that's the context. So when they looked at industrial and commercial, certainly on the industrial side, they have regulated a capping in cities like Hamilton to bring it more in line with the provincial average. Is that correct? Through the chair.
Yeah. So through the chair, that's correct, and that is what's referenced on page 9 of 16 is those provincial ranges of fairness. So municipalities are required to develop their tax ratios within that range, and currently we have two classes that are outside that range, which is our residual industrial and our large industrial class.
Now, it appears that they are now in the preliminary stages of looking at multi-residential in the same way through their actions this year. Would that be a fair statement through the chair?
So through the chair, I'm not sure that, and again, I don't know for certain that they would be looking at affecting that range of fairness, the threshold for multi-res. I believe in part they're simply reacting to what's occurring as it relates to property valuation. And so the reaction was to impose a restriction, a freeze for 2017 to give them an opportunity to better assess what's occurring and to work with municipalities and other stakeholders to try to arrive at a solution, hopefully starting in 2018, that will provide some sort of permanent change as it relates to the outcome they're achieving. And so my understanding is the outcome they are trying to achieve is to try to improve the burden for renters, and again, based on the action that the province has taken to impose a restriction on 2017, it's hard to assess whether or not that will provide direct relief to renters, or it will just simply cause a pause or create a halt in terms of the overall increase in the multi-res class.
Well, I appreciate it. I think that's why I provided context in the fact that their actions, they're better equipped across the different ministries to address these issues. So when we talk about the multi-residential tax rate, is that unique to Hamilton?
So through the chair, in terms of Hamilton's multi-res tax ratio is just below the provincial range of fairness. I believe it's the provincial threshold's 2.74, and you can see in the stats report we're currently at 2.69. So we're below that threshold, and that is a province-wide threshold, that 2.74.
So I appreciate that context and clarity. And again, back to the fact that the province of Ontario, with recent activities in Toronto on rent control, for example, where most of the rent control, I believe, was based on buildings were built before a certain date. I think it was 91, and now they're looking at introducing new legislation with rent control for 91 and on. Have we seen that or understand that legislation, how it may contemplate the policy shifts on multi-residential taxes?
So through the chair, we haven't had the opportunity to meet with the province to get a better understanding of why they're making some of the policy changes they're making. And it goes beyond just the rent control. They're looking at providing public land for the purpose of social and affordable housing. They're looking at DC credits, development charge credits, to try to incent developers as it relates to multi-res. So in cases where developers face development charges, the province is looking at providing credits to them. So there is a suite of tools that the province is looking at. I haven't had the opportunity yet to meet with provincial representatives in terms of why they've chosen these tools, and staff are looking at these potential changes to try to assess what impact it may have on our tax, our revenue stream, and any impact it might have in redistribution of costs or impacts.
I appreciate it. I think the other backdrop that we're dealing with tax policy under is the fact that I believe it was the Realtor Organization of the Province of Ontario indicated that with places to grow and Greenbelt legislation and a further drive for density, there's a greater demand but less single-family homes being built on the market. And their theory is that the assessment rates or the value of single-family homes with the current supply will be moving up exponentially, which is an assessment impact and a tax impact on those homeowners. Is that being calculated into, are we aware that thesis, that projection is also being calculated into the shift and the impacts of multi-residential?
So through the chair, I'm not sure that that analysis at the provincial level, or I know in the case of at the local level, we haven't had the opportunity to determine how these restrictions may cause, or if it may cause an impact in terms of the demand on single-family residential housing, and if that demand is strong, how might that strong demand impact future valuations of the property. So again, it's market-based. When you have strong demand, as we do currently and have had for some time now for the residential, it has a positive effect on valuations, and that consequently, in the case of the City of Hamilton, creates some shifting in tax burden from other classes onto the residential class. So again, we haven't had the opportunity at the local level to assess whether or not this will create some again, strong demand for residential, and if we have some supply constraints, whether or not that will create some inflationary pressure on the valuation of homes.
I appreciate that. I think it was it might be the Home Builders of Ontario that indicated that the pent-up demand for single-family houses is far greater than the amount of single-family homes being built in Ontario. So understanding that they may be a bit biased in their presentation, whether it's, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I got to think that there's some merit to their assessment, which concerns me in respect to the many single-family homes in the City of Hamilton and the implication of that moving forward in respect to that demand. And I want to keep an eye on that because that would obviously impact seniors that may be living in a home, and some may argue that you're getting value in your home, but many of them try to live in their home as long as they can, and if they can't afford the taxes based on the increased or exponential increasement of assessment, could force a lot of people out of their homes prematurely. So I would hope that we keep an eye on that and make sure that we consider those impending pressures and issues, social issues, moving forward as we look at these tax ratios. So I just want to highlight that. And those are my comments. I'll take the chair back, and I don't think I have any other speakers. So I need to I think I had Councillor Green that was moving the motion, the report.
Yep, I'll move the report.
Councillor Green, second by Councillor Pearson. Sorry, Councillor Pearson.
Sorry, Mr. Deputy Mayor, and I apologize. And just for the record, I want to be sure that there is no conflict created, that I am a landlord, and we've been speaking about rentals and rents issues, so I want to be sure it's on record that nobody comes back at me and says, well, you partook in this. And
duly noted.
Just on that point, Mr. Deputy Mayor, multi-residential are classified with 7 units or more. I'm not sure about people's holdings. The reason why I brought it forward is because I don't own any properties that have 7 or more units.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. But just for the record, I do not either. I have only single-family residential.
Okay. Second by Councillor Jackson. Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was down at the mayor's breakfast, as you know, and just got in, got trapped afterwards. But just so I'm clear, this is a walk-on motion that's been moved. This has not been moved yet as the amendment?
Correct.
Okay. When's the amendment going to get moved?
Councillor Green, we decided because the length of the motion had just arrived before some of us we didn't all have an opportunity to read it. Councillor Green was generous and showed courtesy to move that motion to the motion section to further give us an opportunity to read it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so it's been duly moved and seconded. All those in favor? Carried. Any opposed? Now we're at discussion items, Tourism Advisory Panel. Is there any discussion respecting item 8.1? May I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Partridge. Yeah, we did. Yes, we did. I moved a motion for items 5.1, 5.3, 5.4. Asked if there's anyone who wished to discuss those items. No one put their hand up, and was duly moved and seconded. It's never too late. You're not looking for a motion. You just want to have an opportunity to go ahead. Latitude's there.
It's just, I wanted to talk about 5.4. I don't know. Jason's not here, so. Oh, there you are. Sorry, 1, 2. Can you hear me? Okay. Let me go back to 5.4. About the stretch goals and where we're behind on targets, and if we could perhaps walk through some of the reasoning or some of the explanations behind our the fact that we're behind the target on a number of our targets on page 2 of 3.
If you'd like me, Mr. Deputy Mayor, to walk through each of those?
Yes. Just if you don't mind, we'll start with add 7 million square feet and just go through why we're behind the targets. Thank you.
So if I could direct Council's attention to Appendix A to the report, we've tried to sort of show some numerical achievement or non-achievement of the targets to sort of explain how we came up with behind, ahead, or on target. And very simply, if it's a 5-year target, it's a numerical target, we divided the number by 5 and said each year that's what we'd have to achieve. So if we haven't got it at the end of year 1, our 1/5, we put it as behind target. It's a conservative way to measure, but I think it's an appropriate way to measure. As you know, we only approved the Economic Development Action Plan in December of 2016. So we're kind of reporting on a period that was mostly past before we had the action plan in place. Nonetheless, we wanted to do the report this year to get you familiar with the format and to see if you're comfortable with how we're reporting it to you and how we're calculating it. So if we walk through the first one where we said we're behind target is the 7 million square feet of new industrial commercial space. And if you just divided our target of 7 million by 5, you would see that 95,000 square feet isn't going to get us there. That's based on March of 2017, 665 was for the year of 2016. So, the good news is we calculate these as of March 8. We have achieved more since that time. However, we're still numerically behind. Next one would be the $2 billion in industrial and commercial construction value. And again, we're behind if you divide that by 5. However, we're having some very positive results, some very positive conversations, and the mayor alluded to some potential successes in the near future that we hope to announce later on in the year. Next one would be triple the municipal tax assessment from Stelco lands. Well, on that one, as you know, it's due to come out of the bankruptcy, hopefully sometime in May, and then we'll see in terms of who has carriage of that property and what ability we have to affect what happens in those lands. So it's one where we haven't really been able to get started on doing something. We're very keen, represents a great opportunity, but in reality, we haven't been able to start anything on that target. In regards to the HSR service to the business parks, again, it's one that is, as an ECDEV department, we've only recently put our focus on. Certainly our colleagues in HSR have been working on this for a couple of years, but in order to say that we think we could be there in 5 years, our assessment is at this point in time, no, that's not going to happen. We're going to need to figure out another way to achieve that. So let me just roll down there. Then at the bottom, I guess the next 3 councillors would be the ones relating to the mayor's additional stretch target, which we added in terms of broadband. So, yes, thank you. Downtown office vacancy rate. Yes, again, if you look at, we measure that twice a year. The next measurement is coming up in June. So we'll be able to advise. We were at 12.8% before, and that's a long stretch from 7%. So we're recording ourselves as behind. We've had some recent successes. Last week, the mayor cut the ribbon on 15,000 new square feet of office space that was occupied in downtown. A user who chooses to remain anonymous, but you'll see that when we produce our vacancy survey over the summer, that rate has come down, but we're still not comfortable in saying we're on target. It keeps us lean and mean, if you will, in terms of working on those targets. So going back to the broadband network one, remembering that we prepared this report the first week of March, and it was bumped several times due to the LRT debate. At that time, we felt we were behind schedule. Since that time, the mayor has convened a meeting of all the broadband providers in the city, an unprecedented, as far as we know, in Canada move. We are working together on a report that identifies where the gaps are and how those gaps might be filled. So if I were preparing this report for you now, I would probably say on target. That meeting was a very important meeting and garnered the support of every single internet provider in the city.
Thank you. If we could go back to a couple of questions. For example, let's talk about the generated total of $2 billion in industrial and commercial construction value. We sit at, is that $23 million currently for this year?
That's for this year to date. So if you go to the column before that,
right,
2016,
yes,
it's $215 million. Add on another 23, which was as of February 28th. That number as of the end of March, by the way, is now 40 million. So again, we've moved up 17 million in 1 month. If you add the 40 to the 215, we're at 255.
And where should we be?
If you divided 2 million by 5, you would say 400 million.
So we're just over halfway there.
Correct.
Okay. And through the chair, can you explain why are we not on target?
Well, because we set stretch targets to a level that we explained when we presented this, that this is not something that we knew exactly how we were going to get there. We wanted to be ambitious. This is the ambitious city. We set stretch targets that would force us to do something different than what we have in the past. That was only approved in December, and we're just now really rolling on the implementation of the action plans to get there. So for me, it's not a big surprise that we're not on target for some of these.
Through the chair, are the targets too aggressive, too ambitious?
Well, you know, we talked about that through the chair. We talked about that at the time we presented it. And we said in terms of motivating staff to think differently, think outside the box, to ask different parties how they do it, we wanted to set them aggressive. They may very well be. As we report back to you each year, you can make that your own determination and whether you want us to change them, if you want us to lower targets. But my view as sort of the leader of the group is, why would we lower targets? Let's shoot for it. We as a group are optimists, I guess, and we would rather be known as the department that is really, really trying to do something different than as a department that is sandbagging their targets.
Through the chair, have 10 local companies on the Profit Magazine fastest growing business list. I'm referring to Appendix A. And we have 4 companies on the list, and very proud to say that. Where are these companies located? Are they in the industrial parks?
Actually, they're all through the chair. They're all over the place, Councillor. They are not necessarily startups. In fact, one was a manufacturer in Stony Creek, one was a construction company in Dundas, one was a company that was a startup out of McMaster, one was in the Ancaster Industrial Park. So they are spread around the city, and from year to year, those will likely change. You have to reapply each year to be in that group, and you have to verify that you are still in the 200 fastest growing companies. So 5 years from now, the companies, which we hope to be 10, that are on that list, may very well be and likely won't be the ones that are currently on that list.
Thank you. Through the chair, extend regular HSR service connected to the broader BLAST network, especially to the airport and the industrial parks. Is that how much, or can you give us any sort of indication with the lack of with the inability to achieve that target, how is that impacting economic growth in the city?
Through the chair, certainly in having meetings with some of the major employers up there, many names that you would be familiar with, Canada Bread, Maple Leaf Foods, the larger manufacturers who have built in our industrial parks, it does affect their ability to attract employees. They're all looking for employees now, and you know, the sad fact is that not everybody has a car or is able to get out there. So it hasn't impacted their operations, but it's impacting their ability to recruit people. So they're constantly in a recruitment mode. So it would be very helpful to them, but of course it has to be balanced against the cost of doing that. And there's a bit of a chicken and egg discussion when you talk about providing additional transit. Do you provide it and then create the demand, see what happens, or do you prove the demand is there first and then provide the service to it? It is a bit of a chicken and egg, and it's a costly chicken and egg because once you bought buses, you can't do much with them afterwards.
Through the chair, could we not simply just do a survey and find out if the need is there? And I mean, do we have to implement a pilot project, or can we not just simply poll some of these companies? I mean, Canada Bread is an example of, we're so proud of it, and yet people can't get to their jobs without a shuttle bus. Is there an opportunity to just poll and find out if there is a need for the service, the extended service?
Through the chair, that's a very good question, Councillor. That's what we're starting to do now, but we need to poll more than the one company. We know Canada Bread's situation pretty well. We know their numbers pretty well. There is the shuttle bus service that you're probably aware of. Part of the problem is that on a multi-shift operation, you need to have buses that also match those shift changes. And as the HSR staff have pointed out to me, and it never occurred to me, is you can't have a bus stop on the side of the road where there isn't a sidewalk. Well, you know what? We haven't had sidewalks put into our industrial parks. So you can't ask somebody to walk on the road to get onto the bus. That's a safety issue. So there's many facets to this. So we're up for the challenge, as are they. Our HSR partners are wonderful, and they understand the issue, and they are working with us within their current constraints.
Thank you. Through the chair, one of the, and perhaps it's because my son went to Guelph, and I know a number of kids that are studying agriculture, but I always find that there's a glaring omission when we talk about economic development, especially in light of the fact that agriculture is such a huge contributor to our local economy. And I know we never think of a cow when we think of Hamilton, but the reality is they contribute so much to our economy, and I see it's absent here as well. What are we actually doing to grow our agri-food business? Because we have Guelph in our backyard. It's one of our strongest economic drivers right now, I think, at least I've been told that in the city. And it's rarely reflected in our discussions when we talk about growing our economic base. What is the city doing to expand our agri-food sector, and particularly in attracting those graduates from Guelph to perhaps consider staying in the area and using their skills? Because as we all know, farming has certainly evolved to a much more technical industry. But as I said, I rarely see it reflected in our growth strategy.
Through the chair, that's a good question, Councillor. It brings up sort of the definition of what our food industry is. There's a big difference between raising the cow, which is farming, and processing the meat from the cow or the products from the cow. So think of Maple Leaf Foods and that. Hamilton's economy is very heavily based on the processing of the food, not so much as the growing. And I would suggest that our agricultural land is probably already fully engaged, the amount of agricultural land we have. And in fact, some of it is disappearing as the pressures of new home building and spread of industry sites. So in terms of creating more cows and more farmers, if you will, it's not something that we have been focused on. We are very much focused on the processing of agricultural products. So again, if you saw probably maybe didn't see it. We just released a video today called the Hamilton Lunch, where we very specifically are targeting those who are in the food processing business. And we talk about the Hamilton Lunch as being 2 slices of bread from Canada Bread. It's got mustard from GS Dunn Mustard on it. It's got microgreens from our local greenhouse industry. We've got meat from Maple Leaf Foods. We've got a coffee from the roasting plant of Tim Hortons. And we've got candy for dessert from our local candy manufacturer in Karma Candy. So that is very much targeted at getting more companies like that, those who process a product. The Port Authority, if you're aware of the progress they've been making down, the Port Authority would tell you that the fastest growing area for them is in the food industry. witness the new flour mill that's been under development down there. $40 million, first new flour mill built in Ontario in something like 40 or 50 years. Bunge, the oilseed processing company. So again, we need to differentiate between growing crops and animals and processing of those crops and animals.
Thank you. I would probably like to see more still effort placed on the growth component. I do know we have some of the largest greenhouses anywhere. I mean, Beverly Greenhouses employs a number of people, and they produce, I believe is it cucumbers or whatever, but it's one of the largest producers of that particular food, and we have one of the largest dairy farms. But I guess my point is I'm not sure if we have exhausted all opportunities in agriculture, and if we are going to be processing it, doesn't it make sense to actually grow the food in the area as well? Anyway, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Partridge.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And on Appendix A, I just wanted to get some clarity on the fourth item down or the fifth item down, where it talks about extending regular HSR service connecting to the broader BLAST network, et cetera, et cetera. Over under the current year trend, it still says the provincial government announced change to Hamilton LRT project scope to include BRT along the BLAST network's A line, provide regular service to John C. Munro. Is that still accurate? I thought that had changed, understanding that there's a big gap between when this report is printed and actually gets in front of us.
Through the chair, you're correct, Councillor. This report was printed back in early March, and since then, particularly in light of Council's decision last week on LRT, that is not happening.
Okay, so I'm just not sure how we correct that, perhaps through you, Chair, to Madam Clerk.
My apologies. I was responding to somebody, so I didn't hear the change. We can't change the actual report that's before us because this is what's provided to committee.
Right. This is Appendix A.
We could submit a new Appendix A at the next meeting, but this has already been received and it's already online.
Yeah, I just, and thank you for that. I'm just concerned that, this is not accurate information, understanding all the timing involved, but I just want to make sure that there's clarity around it and that anyone looking at this report 5 months from now, going back to today's date, the information is not accurate. So I'm not quite sure how we deal with that. But
I think could I suggest that the staff has heard the expression of clarity on the report. I don't think we need a formal amendment to ensure that the future reports reflect that change.
Future reports, yes, I agree with that. But this particular report, my apologies, I thought you wanted to change this one. This particular report we cannot change, but future reports, absolutely.
Yeah, no, and I was just looking for clarification on the process. So thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Okay, I actually have myself on the list, so I'm going to ask Councillor Skelly. The challenge I have is when I was in Kitchener-Waterloo looking at their reports, and I was looking at Mississauga and their reports, I feel that we had a report recently in regards to whether or not we're meeting our employment targets in our downtown, and we're not. I don't see that really clarified in this report. We haven't even hit our growth targets in the last 10 years. I don't see it in this report. And when I take a look at the amount of space and square footage and employment in some of these other communities that we have a friendly competition with, let's say the least, it seems that we're underperforming relative to other communities. So can I suggest moving forward that we do get a better idea how we are performing relative to our comparators on some of these very fronts, because it feels like I'm looking in isolation. And I don't have a greater understanding on whether or not we're underperforming relative to other communities or we're overperforming or at par. And looking in isolation, or it doesn't provide that context. But my sense talking to, certainly when I was in Kitchener-Waterloo, is we're underperforming, certainly relative to what's going on there. And I've seen a report again, like I said, from Mississauga. It seems to me that we got some real challenges in regards to what is happening around us. I was celebrating our numbers recently, only to find out that many other communities are exceeding us around us. So I think it's helpful to have that report because we can't lose sight of how we're doing relative to our comparators. This doesn't do that. So can I ask to the chair whether we could have those comparators?
Through the chair to the councillor, certainly if council tells us which statistics they would like compared, we can. What we're reporting on here were the 11 stretch targets and the Economic Development Action Plan that you approved in December. That's the point of this report. If there's another, in there was no provision for a comparator on certain standards to other communities. So, if you want to tell us which those standards were, we'd be happy to incorporate them as long as it's measurable. And it is, in fact, comparable. So, I hear you, Councillor, in terms of Kitchener-Waterloo, when we look with envy in terms of the growth in their tech sector up there. I had a funny incident in the Fortinos the other day. Michelle Sergi, our former manager of planning, saw me in there and said, hey, how's it going? Because she now works in Kitchener, and said, the topic in Kitchener everywhere is how great Hamilton's doing. So that felt kind of good. So if you tell us what it is, and if it's measurable, we'd be happy to report on it. The trick is, what are the comparators? I mean, we have a different situation in office vacancy. It is one of our stretch targets, as you realize, to try and get us down to 7%. We have a very different situation than downtown Kitchener because of the stock that we had. And remember, just 9 years ago, we were at a 19% vacancy rate. So again, we're starting from a different point. So it's a little bit dangerous to compare ourselves to communities on standards and on progress that may not be relevant to them. But we are pleased to incorporate any measures that you want that, in fact, would give you some comfort about how we're going, or lack of comfort. And as long as they're measurable and we can find them, we'll put them in a report.
Yeah, I think what's listed here in regards to commercial, industrial, or square footage is it easy measurable from community to community. I think most of the stuff that I'm looking at, in fact, are very measurable relative to those other communities. So I'm prepared to take that offline and have a further discussion and maybe work with staff to develop a motion. But, when our kids get tested as a provincial standard they're compared to, it's not in isolation in regards to how we're doing in Hamilton. And I often look at our numbers in isolation, and it feels good until I hear the numbers from other communities, and I realize that in some of these areas we're actually falling behind. So I would, I've always said this, we need the good, bad, and the ugly, and then we need to, once we understand it, we need to move and create the, lift those barriers and create a very aggressive policy approach to fixing those areas of deficiency. And looking at things in isolation doesn't really help facilitate that. It's a feel-good exercise because we did better than we did last year, or we set these targets, but then when you look again at having context in other communities, it's kind of scary to me when I heard some of the square footage, for example, in Kitchener-Waterloo on industrial and commercial, for example, or Mississauga, for example, or Oakville, for example. And then when I hear on our grids that we haven't hit our own employment targets, we haven't hit our growth targets, it concerns me, and we need to understand the rationale why and how we, in a very open and transparent way, address what the barriers are, break down those barriers so that we can achieve greater success in the future. So I will work with staff offline. And the other question I have is, the transit piece. We do have an A-line, by the way, express from the airport to the GO station now. It's an express. It's a little different than the current B-line that's currently in place. But we do have employment lands in Maple Leaf, Navistar, out in Ancaster. We have the Rymal line. We already have a service that's full service up to Lancaster, yet we got employees that can't get out. And I do get the calls, not 2 or 3, that on a weekend can't get out to the employment lands to work because we don't have a bus that goes beyond Lancaster on Ramble Road. So from an economic point of view, how do you respond to that?
Through the chair to the councillor, again, certainly that's why we put it in. It's important to us, but the dollars are controlled, to a great extent through council and HSR. It would take an investment in the HSR higher than what is currently there to provide that. Anything can be done, but there's a cost that goes with everything. And our HSR partners, as I said, are good to work with, and they're keen to do whatever they can, but they have financial realities they have to live within as well. We are trying to look outside the box, and we're trying to explore with those employers and say, is there a potential for some sort of cost sharing? We're looking at creative ways to make this happen. Is there a way at all to get this going that doesn't require multi-million dollars of fixed capital investment.
Fair enough. It seems to me, though, if we're committed to transit and we're committed to getting people to the employment lands, then we should put our money where our mouth is. And currently, we have a system that is adjunct at Lancaster Road, doesn't go beyond that border to provide full service through weekends, and there are employees that have to find alternative ways to get to work, and I think that's unfortunate in this day and age in this community. So I wanted to highlight that. Thank you. Those are my comments.
I'll hand you the chair, but Councillor Ferguson has a question.
Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to correct you on something about the service into the Ancaster Industrial Park. 2 years ago, there was a delegation come in here from Redeemer University wanting evening and weekend service, and these same arguments come up. And 2 years ago, and it's all area rated to Ancaster, and not one person rides it, we added evening weekend service into the Ancaster Industrial Park on an hourly basis. So that service was provided. It was provided 2 years ago through a budget enhancement. And quite frankly, I'm looking forward to HSR with this new capital getting the passenger counters on there, because I've never seen anybody riding that bus. And I pass it day and night, and I purposely watch for that. And so we may be looking at taking service away if it's not being utilized. And so when we get that passenger count survey, I'm looking forward to see whether we should be reducing trips, because it's transit, quite frankly, is to use it or lose it. And if it's being used, perfect. But if nobody's taking it, why the heck would we, putting fumes into the environment and paying for the bus and the transit to provide that service is not being used? I can tell you, going into the Ancaster Industrial Park, because I pass it every morning, is the people driving there, and the congestion to get in there is unconscionable, backs up to Dutch Corners, is because we can't figure out, after 7 friggin' years, how to put that second access in there in Claremont Road Extension out to Trinity. There's all these barriers the province and the city puts in front of us, telling us why we can't do it, instead of how we can. And I got Jason on this now, and he's engaging also. But we just hit another roadblock. It's going to delay it another year because of another study that has to be done and has to go through 4 seasons. So that's the issue, is getting in. Once we get Claremont Road extended in the Ancaster Industrial Park, it allows Valerie to bring on another 45 acres, and he's got buyers lined up to take that land. So that's our issue in our industrial park in Ancaster, is not the bus service, but it's getting that second edition. And I've been beating on that in this council chambers for the last 6 years. Money was approved back in 2007, but we can't get through the approvals. I tell you, my heart goes out to the developers who have to go through this, because we're experiencing it now as a city, trying to get approval. We've actually found bats that may be nesting there, but I thought bats were pests. But now we have to find a place for them for habitat. Anyhow, it's frustrating as hell. So thank you, Mr.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Scully. Yep, second time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is regarding it's continuing along the line of Councillor Whitehead's questioning about the vacancy rate. The current rate is 13. Well, it was in 2016. We don't know our current rate, but do we have any idea what the current rate could be, the vacancy rate in the downtown core?
Through the chair to the councillor, at last measure it was 12.8%. We'll measure again in June, so we're coming up very close. I would suspect it's getting closer to the 12%. I'd be surprised if it dips below 12. We had over 500,000 square feet vacant in our last survey, so it takes a fair bit to move the needle. The 15,000 square foot company addition that I mentioned previously is helpful, but we need several of those to move it. And most of that vacancy sits across the street, by the way, in the Jackson Square complex, some of the older towers.
Thank you. Through the chair, how much of the new utilized space is simply a transfer of the jobs from the mountain downtown?
Through the Deputy Mayor to the Councillor, we don't track that. I would not know that question. That would be a question for the landlords. I don't think they're actually tracking it either. It's rented space as far as they're concerned. It's getting people into the empty space.
Through the chair, how much of it is new tax revenue?
Again, that might be a question for Mr. Zagarik. It depends on, I guess, I'll let Mike answer, but unless it was a totally vacant building before, it changes the occupancy of that building, and so there's less vacant, and I assume their taxes go up, and I'll let the expert talk about that aspect of it.
Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, Glenn's correct in terms of in order for a occupancy to be a net benefit to the city, it would have to be new occupants, not just a transfer of tenants from one building to another.
So through the chair, we don't know if there's any sort of impact on our non-residential tax base in the downtown core through the decrease in vacancy.
So through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I would expect, based on where we're trending in our downtown, that there has been relief in terms of our office space contribution to our tax revenue. We can provide that. Where we would see it in part would be through our vacancy rebates. So we provide opportunities to landlords to apply for vacancy rebate, and we can provide that information as it relates to our downtown office space.
Thank you. Through the chair, my concern is that we're just increasing with public jobs, educational institutions, more of our own city of Hamilton, healthcare sector that aren't paying taxes. One last question, and just to clarify through the chair, and it's in light of the developments around the decision last week at council. So the original decision by the province to direct funds towards expanding blast on the mountain to the airport is off the table. That money is gone. Is that correct? That money has been redirected to the LRT. Is that correct?
I'm not sure who that question is directed to. This is not my area.
Is there someone who can speak to that?
Perhaps Mr. Zierek?
I might be able to help. I did talk to both Technique and the mayor and Paul Johnson. It's my understanding that the $120 million saving from the spur line that they were looking at starting to study on A line would be reallocated to getting the LRT out to Eastgate.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Okay. Councillor, can you take the chair for a sec? Glenn, this is another important element. When you shift jobs that are paying taxes in one location to the downtown, is that classified as a net benefit? Or just a net benefit geographically? How do you calculate that because there's 300 jobs came from the West Mountain, came downtown. I need to understand, so you celebrate the vacancy being taken up through that transference, but also left a hole in another area of the city. So how are we taking those as wins? Are we taking them as like asterisks, where basically these aren't new jobs or new tax generation, this is just a shift within the community?
So through the chair to the councillor, we're not recording it as a win or a loss. We're just recording it as a statistical change, right? It just is 350 more jobs in the downtown. Yes, you're correct. In the case of HHSC, they consolidated in their operations for their own good and valid business reasons from several locations. So we don't try and portray it as anything other than that is a statistical gain.
So would it be helpful through the chair if we put asterisks behind jobs that are actually just a shift from a different location with the community? Because I really am more interested and curious on new jobs that we're bringing to this community and not jobs that we're stripping from other areas of the city, because I don't see that as a net benefit. It might be a good strategy in regards to the business. It might be a good strategy in regards to vacancy downtown. But from a tax generation point of view, I think we need to at least identify it as separate the new jobs that are being put into those vacancies versus the ones that are just shifting from other areas of the city.
Through the chair to the councillor, I don't know how we'd measure that, but it's not something we ask a landlord, right? When we do our vacancy survey, it's about how many square feet do you have currently empty based on the size of your building versus where you were. And no time do we ask them to report who are your tenants and how much space are each of your tenants taking up. That's what we'd have to do that. And that is a whole different exercise than what we're currently doing. I don't think, other than anecdotally where we would know it, I don't know who's moved into a certain building, for instance, right now and taken up 5,000 square feet or grown their business. And we don't know if you grew your business, if you're already in the downtown and say had a location location elsewhere in the city, there's no way that we or the landlord would be tracking where those other jobs came from. I don't know how it'd be possible.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I find that a bit surprising when I sat down with Manpower and Blue Ribbon and looked at the analytical analysis they've done in this community. It was pretty clear that all that information is available. I know that our economic development department have people that go into a lot of these businesses to retain jobs, understand issues. We do a good job. I can't understand why we wouldn't be able to have an understanding of if these are jobs that are already pre-existing in this community or they're jobs being transferred. So I think we have the tools because I've seen it.
Through the chair to the councillor, it's anecdotal. It's not a thorough count. So when we go in and you're talking about the Hamilton Call-In program, and yes, we do have staff that go in to meet with major employers on a fairly regular basis. It's not everybody every year. And certainly one of the questions that they ask them is, what are your hiring intentions? What are your capital needs? What issues do you currently have in the city? How are things going for you? What can we do to help? Those type of questions. Again, they're anecdotal, so we can give you anecdotal evidence of those that we called on and those who gave us that information. But if you're looking for a survey so that it captures everything, that's a whole different ball game, and that's a whole different degree of work and measurement than what we currently can do.
It's disappointing with all the tools and assessments I've seen us use that we can't now assess whether we're attaining new jobs or we're recycling jobs that already exist in this community, and I think we need to have that analysis because anyway, I'm frustrated now because I know we have the tools. I've seen it. I sat around that Blue Ribbon camp. They had breakdowns of employers. They had to break down how many jobs each employer had. I saw the breakdowns. And now I'm told that we can't do it, because it's just anecdotal. So I'm a bit confused with the report I'm getting now, compared to the many meetings I've attended on the Blue Ribbon Task Force.
So through the chair to the councillor, we can certainly discuss this offline, and you can show me where you're getting it. If it's with every employer in the city, I'll be surprised. I know they do surveying, and again, a survey is just one technique. A survey is not everybody. It's a representational thing. If there's somebody out there that's doing every employer, that's great, but that is not us. That is not active. I'll be pleased to see it if it exists, councillor.
Appreciate it. And we'll work with staff to develop a strategy and how we might be able provide that information, because I think in fairness to this community, we need to know how well we're doing in tracking new jobs in this community. And I think that's important. So when we celebrate vacancy in the lower city, we need to understand how much of it is a reshift from a different area of the city or how much of it is actually new jobs, because I think they both have a different narrative, and it's one that needs to be understood. So those are my comments. I'll take the chair back. Any other comments? So we already received 5.4, so we're now at discussion items, tourism advisory panel. Is there any discussion on 8.1? Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Mr. Deputy Mayor. So through you to Director Anna Bradford. So Anna, if I read your report correctly here, we once had, if I recall, over the last 15 years, let's say since amalgamation, we had this arm's length Tourism Hamilton made up of industry people because that was the right way to go. And they're the folks who know the industry best. And a few years ago, I remember city staff, Mr. Deputy Mayor, recommended, no, we need to dissolve that. We need to bring it in-house as an advisory committee, because that way I'll have greater cloud authority under the auspices of City Council. Now I'm reading today, no, we don't want the advisory committee anymore. Who knows best the tourism industry but setting up a tourism advisory panel made up of industry people and not just citizens at large or city staff. Mr. Deputy Mayor, through you to Anna, forgive a little bit of my cheekiness, Anna. Through you to Anna. Anna, is my interpretation correct? Correct my history, and just tell me why we're going back in this direction, please.
So through the chair, when the dissolution of Tourism Hamilton happened, part of the report suggested that we have an advisory committee, which was similar to many other advisory committees that are in the city of Hamilton. As we move forward and did the tourism strategy, which was adopted by council, the strategy suggested that we had too many committees that were bringing forward ideas or trying to report on the same industry. We looked at what's the best way to collapse everything together, and we came up with the tourism industry, basically, committee, so that they're representing themselves and they are the best people to tell council or report back to council on the health of their sector.
Okay, so we're going back to arm's length. What's the role of, if we support this here today, what's the role of city staff, if any, then? Mr. Deputy Mayor, through you.
Through the chair. So if you look at the tourism industry panel, the composition is that city staff do sit with them also, so that we are working in collaboration together. And we also have up to 2 councillors who have an interest in the tourism field who will also be on this panel.
Okay, so, and now, not to bring our city solicitor's not here. I know she'll be here a little later, and she was here earlier, and I'm not trying to complicate this, Mr. Deputy Mayor, but if you recall, we've had some discussions over what's a liaison member of a board, where a member of council is appointed, can actually sit and vote at that board table. We know through darts we learned it's really, a contract. I'm not trying to complicate this. I just want something simple, consistent, to know where council's role is, city staff's role is with the industry, and if it's going to be an advisory group that reports up through a standing committee of council and council like we've had the last few years, I thought that was working fine. If the industry wants to take it back, if you will, I thought there was also with Tourism Hamilton, if I recall, there may have been some legal issues that they ran into, I don't know, with the federal government, whatever might have been the case with CRA. I don't know. I'm just saying that, word on the street was possibly there was some additional complexities. So I just don't want to go back to something we've tried and then find out that, no, in a year or two that, no, we want to bring it back in-house again. I'm looking for consistency and I guess, Anna, some assurances that ultimately this is the way to go and that this will bring the most benefit. Mr. Deputy Mayor, through to Anna.
Through the chair, when we did the tourism strategy, the strategic priority number 1 was about leadership. And so it noted the requirement that strong leadership brings together the public and the private sector at a senior level. This is what we're looking for the growth of tourism and marketing. So when we had our advisory committees, what was happening was we were not getting representation of those from the tourism sector. We were getting very well-intentioned, passionate people who really were supportive of tourism in our city, but they did not have any of the background in tourism. So when we have this panel, it's ensuring us, staff, that we are working with those that we need to. So we will have people on this as an industry committee from the accommodation sector, the attraction sector, hospitality, and any other related sectors that bolster tourism within the city of Hamilton. We'll also bring in members from time to time on specific things such as major events that are coming into the city, city planning perhaps, transportation, etc. So we feel as staff this is the best way to go in that we can get the best information back to council through this industry committee. We're very happy to work with them. We do meet now and it's worked quite well.
Okay, Anna. City Solicitor Auty, thank you, Nicole, for coming back in. Page 3 of the 4 of the report, Mr. Deputy Mayor says City Solicitor Legal Services was consulted, provided advice. So, Nicole, not to reopen the darts RBG thing where our council colleagues really can't vote, they just can sit in the back row and be liaise. What's your judgment and what's your interpretation if we go in this direction of a tourism advisory panel that the industry more or less will be controlling? Mr. Deputy Mayor, through to Nicole, she's had a chance to review, and only because it says legal services provide advice on the terms of reference.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, Deputy Mayor. So I did not consult on this myself, but I understand that the former city solicitor did. So I can't speak directly to it in terms of the conversations that took place, but certainly council is entitled, and certainly it seems reasonable to me to empower a panel that would give industry-specific advice to council to allow that. It depends, and certainly we can speak further on that, but council can set up, and basically all of these committees and different boards have different mandates as set by council. So if the mandate is to get industry-specific advice, then that's the membership that you should seek. In terms of council's role on these various panels, well, they are, as I said, determined by those mandates that are usually established by council. So I hope that answers.
Tom, I got Anna is wanted to intercede.
Pardon me?
Anna want to.
Oh, yeah, sure, please. Thank you, Nicole. And I didn't mean to catch you off guard as somebody who's inherited the file, but so I just want to know that my three colleagues here who were consultant, obviously they have a strong interest. They always have consistently, Councillor Partridge, Pasuta, and Conley. I just want to know that on their behalf, they'll be able to vote at the table and offer input and have the authority that every other member will. Mr. Deputy Mayor, through you to Anna, you said. Anna want to offer further input?
Yes, thank you, through the chair. So I want to be clear, and I'm sorry if it wasn't clear in the report, that this is not to replace staff or the work that we do or that we're taking direction from this panel at all. What we're asking for is that instead of an advisory committee, which could be citizens, that we actually have an advisory panel, which is made up of industry experts of the tourism industry in Hamilton to help us with our work. So they're not there to direct us. They're not to act as a board, nothing like that. It is strictly for advice, but they are the best people that can provide us advice for this, the tourism industry.
Okay, Anna, that's fine. Mr. Deputy Mayor, thanks for your indulgence. I'm not trying to belabor or expand a discussion on something that might seem minute. But the recommendation is the Tourism Advisory Committee of Council be disbanded. So that tells me that what we had reporting up through this committee and council now no longer will be, and we're somewhat going back to what we had. I hope it works. Thanks, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Partridge, then Councillor Ferguson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And, Anna, thank you for bringing this forward. I just wanted to clarify, though, as we've had many discussions about it, and I will speak to it first, but I want to, or after I ask my question. Nowhere in the motion or the recommendations does it suggest that Councillor Conley, myself, and Partridge would still be, Pasuta would still be involved. And through our discussions, because we've had many over the past several months, it was my understanding that we would be added to be part of this new formed tourism group. Can you just speak to that, please?
So through the chair, what we're asking for today is the approval of this new advisory committee, and then we will come back to council asking for council members on it. And if you volunteer, then I'm sure that we will accept you.
Okay, that's fine. It can't be rolled into one at this point, Madam Clerk?
My apologies, you catch me both times. I'm trying to get quorum, so I was emailing for quorum.
I know. There's lots going on.
Would I ask you to repeat the question?
Yeah, we're dealing with a few things around this table right now. So my question through the chair is, with the recommendation in this particular report, could it not include council members being added to the new group setup? Although this is just for the disbandment, just for the disbandment.
To this.
Okay, I think I've talked myself into answering my own question, but thank you. So again, I just want to, for my council colleagues to know that, certainly Anna and staff have been discussing this with Councillor Conley and Councillor Pasuta before December. We had several meetings with ourselves, but also some preliminary meetings with the tourism group, and it really became, and again, passionate people who care deeply about our tourism industry. But I think it became clear that, we have this group of professionals that are actively working on tourism initiatives to bring, tourists into our city, that we're working on initiatives that this group, was at the 45,000 foot level, let me put it that way. So I agree with this recommendation. I'm happy to move it, provided we still have councillors involved in the group. I don't want to see this be staff and the outside organizations working on it, but I do think that this new formation, or this collective, if we want to call it tourism collective of organizations, has really only come together within the past year or year and a half in such a way that they have really been mobilized to work together. Looking at the new fee structure, the tourism fee that we're looking to put on bills, 3%, I think it was, or something like that. Although I have to point out that in Ottawa, where we stay regularly at 16% is what they charge, and no one seems to have a problem with it. So I do think this is the right way to go, as long as councillors are involved in it, because I think that there's now a real commitment, if you will, to organizations to work together to really build our tourism and to build our city. And I think that's an important difference in perhaps how it was before. And I really appreciate Councillor Jackson bringing that bit of history to us, because some of us around the table are not privy to it. So those are my comments, and I would be happy to move this report at the time when appropriate. Thank you.
Councillor Ferguson.
Through you to Anna. Anna, I was contacted by a person who currently sits on the committee, a new person who went through the interview process and was selected and was all excited about it. Then she was told the committee was disbanded and didn't know why. Well, if this motion gets carried to council, will all the current members be thanked for their service and be sent a copy of this report as the logic is why we're going in this direction, just so they don't feel a little offended?
Through the chair, we did meet with the chair and co-chair, or vice chair, sorry, of the current advisory committee. We had a meeting with her, and definitely we will be contacting them. We'll be providing all of this information to those that were on the committee. And again, I want to emphasize these were very, very good people. They were passionate about tourism. They want to see tourism be very, very successful in this city, and we left it that we hope that they would always remain with us, and as we had different working groups form, and that we could bring them back in and out, and they said they would certainly consider that type of thing as it rolls forward. So we have been in contact with them, and they have not been left out of this process.
Okay, I'm not sure the person I talked to is either a chair or vice chair, but they really felt that the way they approached this is, I've been fired and I don't know why. And so I want to make sure that every member of that committee who's now finished their service is given a copy of this report, because it very nicely explains why. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the tourism? So I have it moved by Councillor Pearson, second. Sorry, you had stepped out. Go ahead.
I was listening keenly, just waiting for Councillor Ferguson for my turn here. My question is, it's been asked before, and I don't know how relevant it is to this report, but I do know that I had major exception to what I call the subsidy of the corporate sector with some of the enhancements that came forward and this new taxation that they're going to put on people. Mr. Deputy Mayor, through you to Anna, will this committee be in charge of or provide oversight to this new pseudo tax, this visitors tax that the private sector is putting on people? Who will be overseeing that, and will we have a seat at the table?
Through the chair, no, this committee are not the people that would oversee that. That particular work is going to be done through an organization that is arm's length from the city. They are setting themselves up, and we do not sit on that, nor are councillors on that. That is their own organization of the hotels for a DMP.
Well, I find that kind of strange that we have all these different multiple layers. Private sector says they want to have carriage over our citizen advisory committee, and yet, they want to have their own committee to be directing their pseudo tax or their fake tax. I'm still challenged by that a little bit, and I'm still challenged by the fact that we're charging people to visit the city extra. So what provincial regulation, what oversight is there over this third-party corporate sector pseudo-tax body?
So through the chair, they are a body unto themselves. The city is not involved in it. They are their own organization. Legally, they can set up this organization and charge a volunteer contribution on hotel rooms. They will have the money themselves. It does not flow to the city or anything. What they will do with that money is that if they want to contribute while we're doing bids and things like that, so say a bid comes through and the bid cost is $100,000, they may contribute half of that if they so desire. They do not have to contribute anything, but we'll work closely with them because it's in their benefit and the city's benefit to get these large conventions in town.
But the last time I checked, we got out of the convention business. We privatized it with a contractor. and then we topped up their enhancement to give taxpayer dollars to go chase down bids for the private sector, and now I'm hearing that this body does not have government oversight, and yet they will choose whether or not they go in on subsidizing their own corporate welfare, if I could call it that.
Through the chair, I'm not aware of any organization that has taken over the solicitation of conferences coming to the City of Hamilton. That is our sales staff internally that do that. We do work with this organization, which has formed themselves. It's only, we work with them to help bolster the number of bids and size of bids that we can bid on for the city coming in here.
Have any of the hotels that have been built using DCs and using other incentives had a change of use where they're now into seniors care or long-term housing? Has there been any of that happening?
Through the chair, I'm not sure exactly what your question is, Councillor. I know there was one project where a former empty post office building on Caroline Street was converted to a Staybridges hotel, did access our incentive programs. That was since sold to a retirement facility, and therefore our facilities were repaid, and a new Staybridges hotel was built just here on Caroline Street.
I made the comment before, whether it's accurate or not, it was the way I was feeling at the moment, that we provide heavy subsidies to this hospitality industry through our DC exemptions. They build, they profit by, and then we subsidize these bids. Are there any other, through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, to Glenn, are there any other industries that we doubled down quite like this in terms of very targeted, specific financial support and staff support on?
So through the chair to the councillor, our incentives are area-based.
My apologies, right? not on the incentive program, but on the tourism program. So we have a very clear tax-funded corporate subsidy for a very specific industry that has its own department. Are there any other departments that have that same type of targeted tax levy-funded industry?
I can, through the chair, I think just in way of explanation, it isn't just the hotels that benefit from the city being involved in attracting tourists here. It is a much wider industry. So it's your attractions, it's your restaurants, it's the retail sector, B&Bs, all sorts of things. So not just the established hotels that are here.
So hospitality, the whole sector. I'm very aware of that.
And in addition, it's about the image of the city. So when we're attracting large conventions here or a Juno Awards, we receive a lot of benefit of this being a very attractive city to come to a large event or a convention, but that could spur into, oh, this is a very interesting community. Maybe this would be good for my business. So there's many layers that happen through tourism. Very
aware and completely appreciative of that stance and that position. I'm still concerned that we have a body that was an advisory to the city is now going to be private sector. So the private sector has said we want to take over that piece of work. And they have another subcommittee that is going to be directing how they use their visitor subsidized marketing dollars without any government oversight at any level. I'm still very concerned by that, and I feel like this particular industry, although has a great impact, everybody knows I'm very supportive of the arts and music and culture. I support all of those things, but I'm still challenged by the tax levy dollars of residents here going to subsidize private sector while they're taxing visitors to come here. It feels a bit disproportionate in terms of our economic development strategies, what we heard from the consultants when they came in and said this is where we need to be focused. And I also appreciate have an economic development department that does a fantastic job there. So I'm putting those concerns. Just know, Mr. Deputy Mayor and members of this committee, Anna, I think you know the work that you guys do in the culture division there is great, and I appreciate the work with the tourism. I just don't like how murky it is between the public and the private sector, between the tax levy dollars and the private sector dollars. And it would be different if we were in the convention business or if we, were a part of some of those things. But I think that industry can start to pay for itself, quite frankly. So those are my opinions. I'm disappointed that we won't have any insight, oversight, or input into how the industry is going to use their pseudo tax. And I say that because I know what's going to happen on the receipts, Mr. Deputy Mayor. People are going to see tax. They're going to think the government's levying it. They're not going to know they're not able to. They're able to check out, and they're going to think it's just another cash grab by the city of Hamilton or the province. So those are my comments on this report, and I'd love to hear who's going to have oversight over this new committee that they're setting up to tax visitors.
Thank you, Councillor Scully. Can you take the chair? I'm first time speaker on this. Well, Councillor, if you really want to go first. I mean, you weren't there, and I was already on the speaker list, so go ahead. I have no problem with that.
No, well, you're the chair. Normally, protocol is that. Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry? Anyhow, just on the point that Councillor Green had mentioned, I have no problem with the committee and the way it's comprised. I do have an issue with that tax. I was reading in something recently about Niagara Falls, and that tax component is becoming a true hotbed of controversy in that there's inconsistency, and people are literally gouging customers and pocketing that tax because of that inconsistency. No one can, there's no paper trail where that money's ending up. So if we go down that road, and W5 did a series on it as well, and it was quite alarming actually, and it was aired at about the same time we were discussing it. So I think a lot can be learned from the mistakes that were made or are being made in Niagara Falls. Ultimately, if we go down that road, those monies should be firstly directed to a independent source and then allocated accordingly from a government source, not self-regulated. So whatever Niagara Falls is doing, we shouldn't be doing or planning to do. So I really need to emphasize that. So I'll support the committee, and I believe what's on the agenda today is how this committee is comprised, not necessarily how that program is going to unfold. But I want to serve notice that when that is a point of discussion, that we need to take a different approach from that of particularly Niagara Falls and other cities, I'm sure, and have some sort of understanding and control over how that flow of where the money ends up and how that money is distributed accordingly. So I'll serve notice accordingly today. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Scully, can you take the chair? So we already have a model here in Hamilton, and that's called the BIAs. So the BIAs have their own boards. And certainly they get tax incentives, parking revenue from the city and other areas of revenue to help facilitate those BIAs. They control the tax revenue they generate for specific projects within their BIAs. They've been empowered to do so, and they have complete control of their dollars. So I'm trying to understand how this is that much different. Now, I understand you want some accountability, but I also understand through the chair that the hospitality industry in mid-sized and larger cities right across North America have this type of tax on their hotel rooms. Is that correct? It's not unique.
Through the chair, just for clarification, the tourism industry panel that we're talking about today has nothing to do with the DMP, which is the money that comes onto hotels. It has nothing to do with that. The money that what they're looking at right now is an organization which is external to the city, not part of this industry panel, which is made up of a collection of hotels who wish to add a voluntary fee on their hotel rooms. They are setting themselves up as a not-for-profit organization. They are being administered by the Hotel Association of Ontario. The money all flows through them. They will have their own board. They make decisions on how that money is going to be spent in terms of marketing. So that could be they could do something on their own, or they could provide some funding to the city to help with a bid incentive, that type of thing. In respect to a voluntary amount of money on hotels. No, it is not unusual. It is all through the United States and through Canada.
So is there empowering legislation that enables them to do this? Or because I know Toronto, in fact, I think they just came out with new legislation to enhance the hospitality tax on hotel rooms or increase it. Was there a mechanism, legislative, through the city or through the province of Ontario that enabled them to get the other hotels to contribute on this hotel tax?
Yes, through the chair, it is through the province of Ontario. There is nothing that says that they cannot do this on a voluntary basis on their own. So they have come together on their own, a group of hotels in the city of Hamilton. No one is forced to participate in it, and they've all signed agreements because they feel that this is going to help with the marketing of the city.
And they would have to register this organization as a nonprofit organization that would be audited through CRA and other means?
That's correct.
Okay, so I don't know, and I use the BIA analogy. I don't see it. Am I wrong? Is it much different than the BIA setting up an organization, taxing their defined stores within the boundary, tapping into other, in their case, they actually tap into other city revenues as well, such as the parking meters?
Input into it, so yes, they will decide on how they want to spend that marketing money. But when they set up their organization, it has very specific parameters on what they can spend their money on, and they will make those decisions. But it is all about marketing tourism and getting tourists to the city of Hamilton through various means.
I appreciate that, and I think that if there's an issue in Niagara Falls, then I'm certain the province will step in and in place to hold accountable. But I think it is, I don't know why we're in fear of something that virtually exists through party agreements now. So those are my comments. I'll take the chair back. I think I had Councillor Marula and then Councillor. Sorry, hang on. Second time I had to ask you Councillor Jackson, then Councillor Marula, then Councillor Green.
Thanks, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Look, I'm getting a little more nervous about this. I'm not trying to play semantics, but at the top of the report, and you're calling it a tourism advisory panel, yet in the first paragraph, you're calling it a tourism industry panel. Please.
Through the chair, my apologies if the report is not clear. It's a tourism industry panel. So that is made up of people, tourism industry, which is the accommodation sector, the attraction sector, hospitality sector, and any other related sectors, which could be the taxi, there could be restaurants on there, anyone that basically is in the industry.
Okay, thank you. So the heading of this report now, 8.1, Mr. Deputy Mayor, maybe the clerk will just note that change, that it's now the tourism industry panel is the subject, not tourism advisory. And that, I think that's not splitting hairs. I think that's a distinction that we need to be clear on. And I'm getting a little more now nervous listening to other questions and comments coming back, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I'm fearful that this is heading back down the journey of Tourism Hamilton, that I can tell you ran into problems with the federal government. I don't know to what extent. I don't know the details. I was never on it. Legal problems somewhere, and it all just kind of converged to leading to its dissolution. And staff asked that it come in-house. And an advisory committee appointed of citizens across our city, which may include industry people as well who could apply, could serve on it at the pleasure of council appointing it. So I'm sensing our Director of Culture and Tourism, I'm sensing her intent is good and pure, just given the history and collapsing an advisory committee of a cross-section of people that industry people could have applied for as well, now going again down a journey of a little more independence, tourism, now it's officially the industry panel. My colleagues can serve on it, but again, I don't know if they'll be liaised like at the darts board or RBG, or whether they'll have voting privileges. Our city solicitor may have to down the road weigh in. I'm not comfortable right today supporting this, Mr. Deputy Mayor, so I just throw those cautions out. Thank you very much.